welcome back to another episode of the Counterculture Podcast. I'm your host, Christian, along with my great friend co-host, Taylor. And we have an exciting episode today. This is going to be one of our counter talks where we have a guest come on. And usually we'll do cultural commentary, but this is going to be something much more specific. We are, again, very fortunate to be joined by Alan Smyth, who is the head of an organization called Saving Innocence. Right, and they spend time with fighting human trafficking, especially sex trafficking. So, really, Alan, I'd love for you first to kind of just share a little bit about yourself, and I guess what was the genesis of Saving Innocence, right? I mean, I just want to hear about the what started that.
First of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here with you and your audience to have a really important conversation. Appreciate it. As you said, my name is Alan Smyth. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Saving Innocence, as you mentioned. You can learn more at savinginnocence.org. If anyone wants to find out more about who we are, there's 6 or 7 videos posted there, some infographics, and there's some good information. We're also on all the social media at Saving Innocence. And we're about a 12-year-old anti-human trafficking agency. And for most of those 12 years, we specialized in the recovery and the restoration of child victims of sex trafficking. And this year, we actually have broadened that to all forms of human trafficking, which means adults and labor trafficking. But our expertise and our specialty has been the young kiddos that are swept up into this horrific crime that's happening in our country. Yeah. And it's our honor to be first responders and show up in the middle of the night usually and help get these kids everything that they need for as long as they need it until they don't need us anymore. And that's kind of our bread and butter, taking care of these kids and getting them back on their feet and help to rehumanize them because they've been dehumanized in prolific ways. And we get a chance to begin to peel back some of that manipulation and brainwashing and the lies and the twisted reality that they've been forced to live in and get them back going, reclaiming their childhood. So that's kind of the short answer to what Saving Innocence is and what we do.
Wow.
No, I mean, that's no words, man. That's awesome.
This is incredible. So, I mean, in what you guys do, it sounds like, again, you are more than just an advocacy group. It seems like you're actually pretty involved with these individual children in this situation. So do y'all work with law enforcement as far as going after, like, how do y'all involve yourselves in helping law enforcement to help these kids?
Yeah, we're contracted by LA County, Los Angeles County, to be first responders when law enforcement, we're close partners with the various law enforcement entities. And when they come across through the work that they're doing, what appears to be a child victim of sex trafficking, as I said earlier, we're enlarging that lately, then they call us and we're on call. We have a hotline and we work hand in hand with the law enforcement. Specifically, we're tied and joined at the hip of the sheriff's department here. With them, we co-lead the LA Trafficking Task Force, which is the largest task force in the nation because it's Los Angeles and it's, the largest group of people in the nation, basically. And that puts us on a national stage like never before. We're giving leadership to all the other task forces in the country. We train and consult around the country. So we do some of that. And we work closely with all the law enforcement, LAPD, Sheriff's Department, Homeland Security, FBI, all of them for the benefit of these victims that have been swept up into this.
Wow, that's really incredible. So again, definitely much more than an advocacy group. So you had said that it was 12 years now that the organization's been around?
Yeah, it was founded in 2010, and so we're going on 13.
Okay, wow, 13 years. So I guess what was the spark of inspiration for you and any other individuals who helped start the organization? What was the spark of inspiration to start it?
That's a great question. I'm not the founder. I joined about 7 years ago. So it had already been going for 3 or 4 years before I got here. And the inspiration, Kim, our founder, had been doing a lot of trafficking work around the world, globally, been to a number of different countries in Africa and some other countries, and then came back home to Southern California. She went to USC, got her master's of social work at USC, years before that. And now with her new eyes of what she's seen happening around the world, she was doing a project here in Los Angeles and realized the same exact thing. It might look different, but it's the same exact thing is happening here in our country. but no one's talking about it. No one's understanding it. It's mischaracterized. It's the wrong language. But the same thing is happening with vulnerable people being exploited and ultimately bought and sold. And so she said, I have to do something. And she wasn't sure what to do exactly. But what she ended up with was, I'm going to start a nonprofit organization. We're going to call it Saving Innocence. And then shortly after that, became, close friends and partners with all the decision makers in Los Angeles County. And we've nurtured that relationship because LA County, in 2014, they figuratively, maybe literally in some ways, but figuratively all said at the same time, wait, these kids are victims. They're not criminals. Like, can you imagine that? Can you imagine a universe where the 13-year-old in a motel room with the 45-year-old, the 13-year-old is the criminal. The 13-year-old gets handcuffed and taken to jail.
Wow.
Because the crime is being committed against her. And so completely understood. And so 2014, they all said, wait a minute, they're victims, not criminals. And now that compelled them to treat them as victims, but they didn't have the bandwidth. They didn't have the expertise. They didn't have the focus to do it. And so that's what they said, hey, Saving Innocence, you're on the ground. Can you take the kids? Can we call you? And we, of course, said, absolutely. It'd be our honor. And that's how it changed overnight in terms of now we had a formal conduit, if you will, of clients of these kids that were formally coming to us and taking care of them. And it's just grown exponentially ever since then. Everything you can measure has gone up, 20 or 30% every year for the last 7 or 8 years. So we're busting at the seams. Sadly, I wish we weren't. I wish we were shrinking and we're going to close the doors soon because there's no need for us. But that's not the trend that we're on. We continue to increase the work that we're doing.
Why do you think that is, as far as, again, you are like you said, busting at the seams? Do you think it's just more awareness of people looking out for these sort of things, or do you think there's actually more proliferation of trafficking, right, happening now versus 7-10 years ago, right? Are we just saying that it's basically worse now?
Both things I think are true at the same time. I think trafficking has continued to grow. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. And so I just saw a stat recently, the latest numbers, there's some 50 million victims of trafficking, AKA slaves, worldwide currently, 50 million around the world. And it's an incredible financial model, incredible in all the worst ways that is, where someone can own a vulnerable person, force them to do this work. They get paid nothing for it. And then the trafficker takes all that money and asserts his ownership and his power over these vulnerable ones. And so that has continued to grow. But also what's happened in the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, and even more lately, there's been more awareness of the crime. There have been more people looking at it and understanding it. And there's been more documentaries made in the Jeffrey Epstein debacle that a lot of people saw that. And so there's just more people that know about it. There's more accountability being issued to states and governors and mayors and police chiefs around the country. And so in most places, they're looking for it more. So if you look for it, you're going to find it. And then what's also happening is more of it's happening, that I believe.
Man. So yeah, it's no longer quite in the shadows. It's kind of got some attention now, but LA County too, you would say that's pretty much like a hotbed for the nation too. You'd think you're in a good spot. I mean, not that it's a good spot, but it's Hollywood, it's everything else.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, and it's not a competition. We'd be happy not to be the leader of trafficking. And there are other major cities that have a real similar, trafficking element happening. The human trafficking, sex trafficking specifically, really falls and follows entertainment. It follows money. It follows destination cities. So you think about that. Okay, LA, let's guess. Oh, Miami is probably huge, and New York and San Francisco. And so all the major cities, trafficking is running rampant. It's a destination city. And LA is a destination city, and all the sports teams and all the business and all the people and all that wealth makes trafficking a very likely reality But that wouldn't be to say that it's not everywhere. It's in all 50 states. Up in North Dakota and Montana and Wyoming, there are cases of human trafficking. And so that's the big aha. First of all, it's here. Most of all, people think about trafficking and they think Thailand, Cambodia. And I was that same person 7 years ago. They said we should look at we should look at Saving Innocence. They do human trafficking. I said, oh, where are they based? Are they based in Thailand? You know, I said that same thing. No, they're right here in LA. So what are you talking about? So a lot of our work is not only first responders taking care of the victims, but it's also training and education. On our website, we have an online digital training course that we created that's pretty robust. And we want to help train the outside world to understand what's happening. How can we ask someone to fix something they don't know anything about? So that's part of what we do. And part of what I do with this book that we'll probably talk about is helping other people understand what's happening here and so they can take an active role.
Right. Well, I'm actually, glad you brought that up on, and I guess I thought of something right before we get into the book was, obviously your focus is there in LA County, but do y'all have, what's the right word? I would say chapters for lack of a better term, but in other cities as far as trying to start Saving Innocence in other major cities in the United States, or is that maybe a down the road sort of thing that you guys are trying to do?
That's down the road. About 5 or 6 years ago, that was something we were really looking at hard, and we were evaluating what cities. And then just about the time when the United States was basically waking up a little bit to this, we started getting inundated with requests for training and consultation. And so we put on hold the fact that we would physically grow into another state while we were buried in people that were already in their locations, that already knew the zip codes and already read the newspaper. They already knew they just want to learn how to do it. And so we've been focusing on that. The state of Texas came to us a few years ago and said, we got a big problem. They determined they had 90,000 children being trafficked in the state of Texas, according to their research. And they said, we need some help. So we went there for a year and a half. And
do you think that's like a border issue or?
It's some of it, although with the minors and the children, it's mostly U.S. born American citizens. Now there is people, and more now than ever, coming over the border. But the U.S. citizens that are here, they're already here. They're already in the foster care system. There's just plenty of victims waiting to be snatched up by the traffickers with bad intentions. Right. So the adults that we're seeing, there are a lot of foreign nationals coming over the border in search of a better life, and their traffickers made promises to them, and now they're swept up. They got to pay off the debt and have to work in this way. So we are seeing a lot of international victims with adults, but most of our young ones are mostly citizens.
Okay, right. Because I know Houston. I mean, that's where we live, and I mean, Houston's always been a big hot spot for trafficking. Obviously, being one of the top 5 largest cities in the country, it shouldn't be surprising, and so that makes sense. So, and I think that kind of goes into, I think we'll just kind of dive on into the book. I think that's kind of really the sort of reason why we kind of came to talking to each other anyway. Your rep Sarah saw our show about masculinity and reached out about it. So and then your book, of course, that was the biggest thing that caught my eye right when she reached out. Is the book titled "Men Fight for Me," right? Which is about how men's role in this sort of fight, and I think, like in my opinion, many different things culturally, men are the key, right? Strong men are the key to fighting these sort of things. So, I guess So I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your book and again, kind of the brainchild, how that came about and everything like that.
Absolutely. And by the way, I saw a little meme recently, and I didn't know if it was an actual study of some kind or just more of a joke, but it said 80% of all problems are caused by men. And I thought, oh, that's funny. And I thought, well, it's actually not that funny because it's probably true. Or in fact, it might even be a little bit low. That number might be low. So this particular problem of human trafficking is almost exclusively, it's predominantly caused by men. Men are most of the buyers. Men are most of the sellers. It's on us, men. We are the problem. And immediately someone's going to hear that and they're going to say, I'm not buying sex and I'm not selling anybody, so I'm going to turn this off because it's not for me. And I would say, no, don't turn it off. Don't tune out, because we need you as part of the solution. Whether you're actively part of the problem or not, we need all men to be part of the solution. And I would challenge us guys and say, there is a small percentage of us guys that are going down that dark rabbit hole of actively participating and buying sex somehow or other. And the rest of us are passively allowing it to happen. So we're part of the problem. Someone might say, well, I'm not allowing it to happen. I say, well, okay, is it happening? Yeah. Okay, then you're allowing it to happen, right? We're complicit in the things that we detest if we see it and we don't do anything to stop it. Yeah. So part of this, and thanks for having me on your show, and your listeners, you're going to learn a lot in this conversation. And now now what are you going to do about it? We need you as part of the solution.
Right.
So that's the first step of the book is men are the problem. And I saw that firsthand at Saving Innocence. Most of the buyers are men. Most of the traffickers are men. It's us. It's men. Okay. Now I'm sitting at a Saturday awareness event in LA a few years ago on human trafficking. It's at a church on a Saturday. And my co-author, Jessica, is on this panel along with a few other people. Our founder, Kim, is on the panel. And right there is a woman named Rachel. And I didn't know her then. She since has become a friend. She's telling her story of how she was being trafficked when she was in college. And in the middle of telling her trauma, she says, at one point, I lost the will. I gave up. And she said, I could no longer fight for myself. I needed someone to fight for me. Well, that lit me up. And I think the book was born right in that moment, because now I have a voice. I have a lane. I'm a man. There's not many men in this fight. Mostly the men are part of the bad part of the equation. I go to anything, some kind of a training event or some kind of a situation. It's mostly women. The women are great. You're killing it out there, ladies. Keep doing it. Now we just need to add to that. The missing ingredient of solving this problem is good, strong, healthy men. And that's my voice. We need to have honest conversations with men about pornography. That's part of trafficking. That's part of the exploitation and trafficking of vulnerable people is pornography.
That's right.
They should rename pornography as just a crime scene. They should have yellow police tape around your computer, guys, because most of the people on there are there against their will, non-consensually. I'm no lawyer, but non-consensual sex is called rape. So we have millions of men looking at their computer or their tablet or their phone or whatever after hours and getting some kind of enjoyment off of watching somebody get raped. And we're desensitizing our future buyers. First age of exposure is 8 or 9 years old, they say. We got 8, 9, 10-year-olds that are looking at pornography, have no idea what they're looking at, but it's desensitizing them. It's changing their view of sexuality. For the young boys, it's teaching them how they should treat women. For the young girls, it's teaching them how they should be treated and what they should expect from men and later on a physical relationship they might have. So we have to have an honest conversation about our role in this exploitive culture. I love your title of your podcast, Counterculture, right? We have to be counterculture, countercultural, because the culture in our country is a rape culture. It's an exploitive culture where it's an abusive culture. And we need men to step up because men are the problem. And so that was the essence of the book. It's not man shaming. It's not beating guys over the head. It's like, okay, come with me on this journey. I was brand new to it myself 7 years ago. And I'm going to tell you what I've learned. You're going to hear from a bunch of survivors, a bunch of heroes. They're sharing their story. We're going to break down the problem. And there's going to be tons and tons of practical action items by the time the book is over so you can know how to get involved. And we're hoping that millions of men will read it. And it's notable to say that the proceeds are benefiting survivors of trafficking. So I can unapologetically urge everyone to buy a handful of books. And whatever profits are there are going to benefit those that have been victimized. And it's going to be an important conversation to have with the men in your life, the sons, the brothers, the buddies, all those people.
Right. Well, I'm really glad that you were bold enough to talk about, I think, the biggest glaring issue when it comes to the human and specifically sex trafficking issue is the consumption of pornography, right, by men, mostly, right? I mean, there are some women that struggle with it, but it's generally a problem for us guys. And like you mentioned, the reality is a large majority of these women, these girls, right, that you're watching have been trafficked, and you're watching their yeah, just these horrifying things, right? I mean, I follow an organization called Fight the New Drug,
Yeah.
right? They do a great job of pointing these sort of things out as well, and it's just unreal, the amount of consumption, and it's kind of one of the biggest driving factors of the sex trafficking um, industry, right? For lack of a better term. Is the pornographic consumption, and the United States is mostly responsible for that. We bring in the most demand, so we're the biggest driving force of that. And what is most upsetting at this point, and this is something we talk about all the time, is that good, authentic masculine things and masculine traits are being suppressed, but those are things that are needed to fight these sort of battles, right? Like you said, for the young lady who was sharing her story, that she just said it ultimately, I needed someone to fight for me, and there was no one there for me, right? That is our role, right, as men. And so, right, when we talk about the idea of authentic masculinity, that's a well, toxic masculinity gets tossed around a lot, right? But when we talk about authentic masculinity, I mean, what would you say that is, for you, right? In writing this book and tackling this issue, what would you say authentic masculinity is, Alan?
Great question. And before I forget, we created a little website called fightforme.net, and that's a place to buy the book. It's on Amazon. You can just type it in Amazon if you want, but take one more step and go to fightforme.net. There's a lot of resources posted there. I've linked Fight the New Drug on there for people that are needing some help with pornography. Okay. The survivors, some of the survivors have written their own books, and they're available there. So just poke around fightforme.net when you buy your case of books and give them to all the men that you know. In chapter 4 of the book, called Man to Man, I answer that very question. What is authentic masculinity? If I'm going to say something is authentic, that must mean there is an inauthentic version, a cheapened version, a counterfeit version, a watered down version of whatever you're talking about. In this case, masculinity. It's absolutely, we're seeing it displayed all throughout culture, on all of our social media, the entertainment industry, our sports heroes, our politicians. Not everyone in all those categories, but we're just inundated. And our young boys and our young girls are inundated with inaccurate, inauthentic versions of what it means to be a man. What is a real man? And so I detailed in that chapter, here are the 4 pillars I believe make up an authentically masculine male. And it came from when I have a son and a daughter. It came from when my son was 5 years old. I got a couple of buddies together, and we said, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to teach these young boys how to be men? What's the plan here? We need a plan. What are we doing? And the first step was to define what it is we're trying to do. Like, what's the target? What's the end zone? You have to know where the finish line is. So we defined authentic masculinity as one, a man who accepts responsibility. He not only accepts the responsibility right in front of him, he steps into the larger responsibility. He'll take responsibility to fix problems that maybe he didn't even create. So pillar number 1 is of an authentic man. Yeah, he's going to accept responsibility. 2, he's going to lead courageously. An authentic man, authentic masculinity, a real man is a strong leader. He leads courageously. And if we're going to fix all these 80% of problems, a lot of them are concerning rich and powerful people. A lot of them are concerning things that seem outside of our ability to actually impact, like maybe human trafficking. So we're going to need courageous leaders to step in. And maybe more realistically, it's your buddies that you hang out with on a Friday night and they want to run over to the strip club. It's going to take a courageous man to stand in their way and say, we're not doing that. We're not participating in that. Oh, what are you talking about? They start calling you names. It's going to take a courageous dad to step in front of his 15-year-old son who's, he's dabbling in pornography. You're going to have to be a courageous dad. It's going to take courageous leaders. 3, he lives a life of service. An authentic man, a real man, is here to serve. He's here to give, not take. One of the men in the book quoted, and he says, as soon as a man takes, he loses all credibility. I thought that's a powerful statement. So a man lives a life of service. He's serving his community, his neighborhood, his country, the world. That's the mindset of a real man. He's here to serve, not to take. And then number 4 is he understands that who he is more important than what he does. We wanted our little boys to understand at 5 years old, listen, you may end up being a great athlete and go do that. You may be a great entertainer, singer, great, do that. You may be real smart, get educated and go lead a company, great, do that. You might work at the corner store. Like, we don't care. Go do what you want to do. That's the external. The internal is what a real man focuses on. He focuses on his character, his integrity, his honesty. Those are the things that a real man focuses on. And then he takes those things and he gives them to the world through his vocation, through his gifts and his talents. So those are the 4 pillars that I'd like to say. This is what it means to be a real man. You're practicing those things. And when we saw it, we celebrated it in our boys. And when we didn't see it, we corrected them. We looked for those themes showing up in movies and different things that we were having conversation around. And I think the important thing for all you men who are listening, number 1, all those work for us at any age. This isn't something you're just teaching your sons. This is for all of us. But the important thing, of those of you that are dads, or you know others that are dads, we have to give our young boys and our young men something to shoot for. I call it the gift of clarity. We have to do that. Because otherwise the world's going to twist it and take over, and they're going to provide all the definitions wrongly for what it means to be a man. So we have to combat that. And that's going to take some courage and some leadership as well. That's what it is. Those are the 4 pillars. That's a world I want to live in, by the way. Where a bunch of men are accepting all responsibilities, are leading courageously, they're serving everyone around them, and they're focusing on the internal. And spoiler alert, it starts with us looking in the mirror. And we have to make sure we are in line with all of those things personally, within our heart. The challenge and the goal is to make all of our lives in sync, not the band, but in sync with the non-exploitive culture that we want our daughters to grow up in. Like, let's get our own affairs together. Let's get our own heart together. Let's be the right kind of husband. Let's serve our wife. Let's take responsibility for our household. Let's do those things, and then let it go outward, like in concentric circles. And then let's think about the neighborhood and the school your kids go to, and your community, and the city and the state. We have enough men doing that. I don't know what the magic number is, but we get past that tipping point, we're going to see a lot of problems go away. That number is not going to be 80% if we get enough men living this way. It'll go down to 70, and then 60, and then 50. Maybe even under 50% of the problems will be men. I don't know. I don't know that part, but that's what it means to be a real man, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean,
it's hard to top that.
I mean, it's hard to disagree, right? I mean, and I, when I think about, our message and the things that we talk about, I think it's right in line with those sort of principles, right? Or those sort of pillars, right? As you put in the book, because what's also funny about that, I guess, from a a self-improvement aspect, right? So for the guys listening, right, and I think women could probably take something from this too, but for the men specifically, is when you do these things that Alan is talking about, you will feel more like your life is full of more purpose in taking those things up, because they're difficult, right? And men thrive off of difficulties and trials and tribulations, right? And when you take these things, right, and willing to take personal responsibility as a first stepping stone, right, and then I think it's where you have to do that first so that you can lead courageously, because you can be confident, right, in who you are, right, as a man, right. You can change the world in a lot of ways, right, by taking care of yourself, by taking personal responsibility, doing the right things for you. You will outwardly affect the world. And so, I mean, that was brilliant. I mean, I can't agree more, because in a lot of, issues in our society today, in our culture today, a lot of it has to do with people skirting responsibility and saying, I'm not, it's not my fault. Like, kind of like you were saying earlier in the beginning, right? I'm not doing anything. I'm not actively doing this. It's like, but you're not, my mom told me this a long time ago when we were growing up. It's like, for me, our listeners know I grew up in a Christian household. It's like you're either moving closer to God or you're moving away from God. There's no like in between, right? And I think it's the same thing here. It's like you're either actively fighting the issues, you're actively going, trying to solve the problem, or you're eventually going to be part of it, right?
Yep.
So I think that was incredible. You're absolutely spot on with that. I mean, I love it.
Well,
I
I
love
mean,
it.
one takeaway that I took out of that was kind of the whole practice what you preach model. I mean, it's one thing to go up on these platforms or to get on social media and to say, do this, do that, but without taking a self-reflection or that look in the mirror, like you talked about, where do you get the right to even start to talk? So that self-reflection inward. I mean, I even see that with just what I was parenting with my son the other day. He, when he gets frustrated, since he's just barely 6, every now and then he gets frustrated and this little bundle of emotions, he'll like either grab at his face or scratch or something like that. And it's easy to get upset at that. But what I've started doing recently is I make him go in the mirror and look at himself and apologize to himself, because
Nice.
ultimately that's who he's hurting. And no parent is perfect. I'm certainly not, but trying to get him to look and realize who he's really hurting is himself. And I think, that as men is a good first step, is taking that inward look. And most people can't or won't choose to do that.
I have another book for you. The book that really influenced me and my buddies when our little boys were 5 and 6. It's called Raising a Modern Day Knight by Robert Lewis. I'd say get that book. If you got a 6-year-old little boy, get that book, and it will be the inspiration and roadmap for you as a dad to think about some of these things. And I highly recommend it. I've never met the man, but it's a great book.
You
think we need to get a few more
how to
dads.
raise a modern day knight is what you said.
Raising a Modern Day Knight is the name of it.
Okay.
Robert Lewis.
My son's about to turn 5, so that's a good thing.
Well, the
for me
scary
to
part too is our boys are the older ones, and then we each have. Well, you have a younger boy, but I'm about to have 2 daughters who follow the boys. So I need that strong knight.
Yep.
Because I'm not always going to be there. So
yeah.
Well, of course, men fight for me. For you can take it age appropriately. There's chunks in there that are going to help you think about your sons and your daughters as well. Not a shameless plug. It's just the truth.
No, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think it's shameless, because again, like you've highlighted, the reality is one of the biggest. I mean, we're talking about children a lot of times in these scenarios, right? And so, I mean, they are the victims, and they are the responsibility of us to take care of. And so, but what's funny is the book title, Raising Modern Day Knight, actually brings up something, because I guess sort of a lighter note, and this has to do with kind of raising boys and I think masculinity in general. We had in our email exchange, we talked about how, I think you said Braveheart. I could see, of course, the movie post is behind you.
Choices, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. We have Braveheart, Gladiator, Rocky. And so, a few good men. So perfect. So, one thing that I talk about a lot, we talked about on our show, but I talk about a lot even in my normal, life when I'm talking to people, is the way masculinity is portrayed. And you've said it too, in culture, in movies, in TV, a lot of times is men that are weak, they're passive, I guess more crudely known as beta males, right? And for some people, younger people, right, listening, so, when I think of those movies, and I just got finished watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy with my 5-year-old, I don't, he didn't quite understand everything, but he enjoyed it, even myself watching those, I even find myself as an adult getting inspired by the things I see in those movies. Why do you think that we don't see strong men portrayed in our culture anymore, right? Like why is it that we don't see movies like that that are inspiring even for grown men?
Yeah, you don't have your John Waynes anymore.
Yeah.
We live in some really interesting times right now. I'm a little older than you guys, but when we all grew up, there was only male and female. There's only 2 genders. Now you get in a fist fight with some people if you suggest there's only male and female, that there's more, and a male can be a female, female can be a male. Like the whole thing is watered down and diluted and disruptive in terms of what a man is and what a woman is. There's a narrative, because there's been so many poor examples of masculinity and so many men that have publicly oppressed and abused, that there's sort of a narrative that all masculinity is toxic masculinity and poisonous masculinity. That's like all masculinity. And so there's been this overcorrection in our society. And somehow the answer by some seems to be make all men less masculine, because the masculinity is what's hurting this world. And so we have to push against that and say, no, there is a bad version of masculinity, of course. That's why I have a job with Saving Innocence, pushing against all the destructive males that are causing all these problems. The answer is not to take good men and tell them to shrink away and be less masculine, to make them more masculine and better masculine and healthy masculine. And these 4 pillars. Let's rewrite the narrative of what it means to be healthy masculinity, and no longer can it only be toxic masculinity. There is a toxic, that's over here. That's in one category. But there's also another version of healthy masculinity that the world desperately needs. Why is all that happening? It's happening right before our eyes. I don't really know all the answers other than what I just said. It's up to us to push against that. And I guess the world needs to see enough good examples of good, strong men that are bringing hope and healing and freedom, rather than the opposite of all those words. And we get enough men doing that, then maybe the narrative won't be all men are bad and all masculinity is toxic. Maybe we can change that, but we probably have to show it by example.
Yeah. Because I think you make a good point that anyone that's honest can point out certain things. Even during the height of the Me Too and the Time's Up sort of situation, it's kind of gone to the wayside, but it was obviously something that was pretty major a few years ago. I would get into conversations where I could see the legitimate points you're making, right? Because like you said, Alan, there is such thing as toxic masculinity. Right? There are things that are bad, right? Where men take advantage, right, of women or children in terrible ways, and that is evil, and we should point that out, right? But to pretend all those things are toxic masculinity, it just makes no sense, right? Or again, when it came to the Me Too stuff, right? Getting into conversations, right? We have to believe all women. It's like, well, we should take everything. We should listen and be empathetic, right? But we also have to be, we have to know that that doesn't make any sense, right? And so, really, I think you point out something that I think is so important, is that it's like we could say, yes, that's bad, but then let's also look over here, right? It's yes and, right? It's like we have to look at both ends of it, right, to productively move forward, right? Because like you said, the continuing bashing of masculinity has gotten to this point where a lot of men, right, are just like, well, if you're just gonna berate me, I guess I'm just gonna check out.
It was that overcorrection. We need to get back to an even balance,
right?
Well, and we're battling society at the largest, biggest, most powerful levels. I remember last year, about this time of the year, I think, we had just finished up a memorial service for one of our children at Saving Innocence, which, by the way, we've had about a dozen or so kids be killed and murdered as a result of this particular lifestyle they're forced into. So this is not, we're not playing here. These traffickers aren't playing. It's a violent, horrific existence they're forced into. And we had just had a murder, and the girl died in such a way, she was found in such a way, I won't go into it here, that confirmed she had experienced atrocious sexual abuse right up until her last breath, a 15-year-old in Los Angeles. And then in that moment, my phone vibrates and buzzes. I'm one of the sports apps that I follow. And the NFL had just announced who the halftime show was going to be for the Super Bowl this past February. And it listed the 3 or 4 guys who have been glamorizing and celebrating sexual abuse their entire career. Mm-hmm. Like literally the biggest musical gig that you can get anymore is the halftime of the Super Bowl. There's 1 billion people watching, get 20 or 30 minutes to do your songs. And the people they put on the stage at the NFL, at the Super Bowl, were some of the most egregious offenders at degrading women and distorting and degrading sexuality in their song lyrics, and made millions upon millions of dollars doing it. And now we're celebrating it, and we're going to stop the Super Bowl, and we're going to shine the spotlight on these people. So what are our kids supposed to take from that? Mm-hmm. Because the kids know all the lyrics. I guess it's no big deal. I guess it's normal. I guess it's okay. I mean, if the largest, most powerful corporation, maybe in the world, if not our country, the NFL, they own a day of the week.
Yeah, right.
If they're going to celebrate it and glamorize these guys, Okay, then I guess I will too. And so we need good, strong men to take leadership in their homes and their families and their communities. And we need some of those good men that are friends with the decision makers at organizations like the NFL. Hey, are we sure we want to do that? Let me just pull up the lyrics that these guys have made famous. Yeah, maybe not. See, no one is putting anyone in check.
Yeah, no one's bold enough. Yeah.
We need good, strong, healthy men in their sphere of influence to step in and confront those with bad intentions, or maybe the intentions aren't bad. They're just misguided and misinformed, and they don't understand what's happening. Until we get enough good, strong men to rise up, stand up, take a stand, we're in bad shape.
Right, because right now I think it's all about chasing the dollar. Well, those are the popular ones. So even if it's against the NFL values or what have you, they're going to let it slide because that's what the viewers want. That's what the paying people. But I mean, you look backwards and just even our generation growing up when you had to pick between, clean albums versus explicit, and your mom would say, oh, you don't listen to this. And, as a kid growing up, you're like, mom, it's just music. It's just lyrics. But it, like, as you were saying, Alan, it starts to numb you. Just like with pornography, it starts to desensitize you. And it starts with the youth. So, I mean, I think we can give them healthy examples and teach them right from wrong. And then hopefully one day when the youth, then get to that point where they're decision makers, whether they're on the board of the NFL, they will stand up. They will say something. But it starts local. It starts here.
Absolutely. It starts in your own home. All of this starts in your own home. And, I staged a massive protest. I'm sure the NFL is just now recovering from. We had a few friends coming over to our house for the Super Bowl. I said, just so you know, I'm turning off the TV for the 20 minutes during the halftime show. I'm refusing to patronize these idiots on the stage who've been glamorizing sexual abuse. I can't do it. So if that's not okay with you, then watch it somewhere else. But that's just what we're doing. And for me in my house, this is what we're doing. And obviously makes no difference on the big picture. But if we can get enough men taking a stand in their personal life and in their home with their kids, leading by example, that's going to be the answer. That's the antidote to this mess.
Right. And you know what's really key about what you just said, Alan, is I think a lot of times people will think to do stuff and their immediate thought after that is like, well, it's not going to really make much of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I won't do it. But what you don't realize, like you said, if your wife is there, if your children are there, and you do something like that, and you explain to them, this is why I'm doing it, right? And that affects them, and in turn, those ripple effects who knows where those can go, right? So I actually really appreciate that you said you did it, because again, for a lot of people that may seem like that's so silly, like come on now, like who cares, like whatever, it's one T, but it's like, but it goes back to you said, like, you got to have, you got to
make a
foundational principles, right, that you are going to stand by, right, no matter what is happening, right? So
guiding principles. How are we going to live our life, guys? What are we going to do? Like, what are we going to say yes to? What are we going to say no to? What are we going to look the other way on? We have to start defining that again, looking in the mirror. Who am I about? Am I about celebrating these guys that are singing about the abuse and the rape and the violence and the murder of women? Am I gonna participate in that? No, I'm not. Okay, super. That's easy. We're gonna turn the TV off for 15 minutes. That's not a big deal. But it's guided by a principle, not by a whim. And then for that dad who does that dad and the mom, whoever, and they got their 10-year-olds or 12-year-olds or whatever. What do you mean? No, this is what we're not going to watch this, and here's why. And then, okay, maybe they understand it, maybe they don't. It'll stick with them, and they'll be more apt to take a principled stand on something later on in their life, and that might be of much higher stakes. But they saw you doing it. They saw it in the home. That not a fanatic, not some crazy person that's saying, yeah, but there's a secretary at that company that did something, so we're not going to buy anything from that company. I'm not saying going psycho on this whole thing, but there's some real obvious opportunities that come to us every day where if we're guided by principles that are in line with a non-exploitive culture, and we're going to use those as our guideposts, your 12-year-old is watching. Your 10-year-old daughter is watching that you're standing up for women and you're standing up for girls. And they're then going to look for somebody as a future boyfriend and a future husband that will also stand up for women and girls.
100%.
There's more ripples to this than you can see with the naked eye. I'm convinced of it. And anything I can do to reach in the screen and through the app and shake someone and say, wake up, guys. This has gone on too long. We have to say no more, not on my watch, and make some small changes. And those small changes will become big over time.
Right, absolutely. And again, the key is just making the decision to take those small steps to better yourself, right? And that's why, like, for people that are listening, especially the men, and we've harped on this, and we'll continue to harp on it. It's like, this is why, again, the biggest way that you can start making positive change when it comes to this, right? Which, in my opinion, right, not just because you're on Alan, but in my opinion, sex trafficking is the biggest problem worldwide. No matter what issues that are happening, this is the most, because again, a lot of times it affects the most vulnerable among us, which are children.
Yeah.
And the greatest thing you can do is to work to get pornography out of your life, right? And I know there are some men, right, some that are listening, I'm sure, that it's not just something they do every once in a while. It probably borderline is an addiction for them,
No doubt.
right? So I know this is difficult, but you have to take steps to get this out of your life, not only for the victims that are being abused in this process, but also for you. It will drastically change, right? So you can even do this selfishly for yourself, those that are listening, right? You will feel better about yourself. You will be healthier, right? Your relationships will be better, right? And you will be better off for it for yourself. So you could do it for you too, right? Along with doing it for these individuals, right? And so that has always been, my biggest thing in talking about stuff like this is like, you can make a difference, right? Even though you may not be able to see it in the moment, right? Those actions will have ripple effects. Like, we cannot stress that enough. Your actions can have ripple effects, guys. For any of y'all that are listening.
True. I mean, go on.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I quote a young lady in the book, Men Fight For Me, that we're talking about, who was trafficked, being actively trafficked, which means they don't have a choice. If they stand up against their trafficker, they can get killed or tortured. And she was trafficked into a movie set of some kind, was raped all night long. Somebody was filming it, and then that made itself up onto one of the mainstream pornography websites. And she says, every time someone watches that video, they're watching me being raped. And there was some 5 million views at that point in time. So literally, and that's just one. The porn sites are infested with stories like that.
Right.
And so we're literally monetizing and patronizing and participating in the raping of women and children by looking at pornography. And some would say there are some consensual participants. And for the sake of the argument, sure, there is. Not that many, though, honestly. The majority are people there against their will in some way. And the problem is,
right,
the guy looking at a screen has no idea which one is truly consensual and which one isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really going to take that chance? Like, can you really go and log on the next time you want to log on, knowing that there's a great possibility that people on there are being raped, they don't want to be there? Is that really going to satisfy us in some way? Like, guys, get some help. If that's you, get some help.
Right.
Because
your likelihood is much higher than 50-50. It's a much higher likelihood than 50-50 that's the case.
Yeah.
Or that's the reality. Is it's more than likely that is the case, right? And that's again, you point that out, an argument that is made, like, well, they're adult consensual adults. It's like, sometimes perhaps, right? And I mean, I still don't think it's a good thing, consensual or not, in my personal opinion. But there is a more than 50% chance that that's not the case, and you're actively participating in that abuse, whether you want to admit that. But you were gonna say something.
Yeah, but not just that. It's like, it's all the bad that comes with it. You just can't know. So instead of furthering that industry, I mean, you got to hit it where it hurts. I mean, there's no one to watch it, then there's no money to be made. And at the end of the day, that industry is made around money. So if enough people start to, shut off the halftime show or stop with pornography, then eventually, hopefully, you make a big enough dent. But it starts with speaking out to other guys. I mean, I personally have never been to a strip club. It's never interested me, but there's a whole culture, around it. I mean, even the stereotype of, your bachelor party, you just have to. I did not. I mean, so I think we start with the stereotypes, and we start with, man to man, your frat brothers, your buddies in high school, and you have those talks like, hey man, this isn't cool. Then those people, hopefully, like you were saying, you make that one conversation, you may get some laughs or jabs, but that may stick with them the next time they think to even entertain that notion.
Yeah, they will. They will think about it. Like, man, like they actually said no. Like, wow, what did
screw
that say
you,
about
Jimmy,
me?
or whatever. Oh, fine, we won't go, but like whatever. And then the next time they're like, is it even worth bringing it up? But yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So, what to kind of start wrapping it up here, Alex? I know, we don't want to take up too much of your evening.
Mm-hmm.
How can so I'll ask you the kind of simple question. So, number one, how can we support Saving Innocence, right? With the work that you get, like what way can people support you guys?
Go to savinginnocence.org, and right when you log on, you'll be asked if you would like to, join the little email newsletter thing. Fill that out. You'll get a monthly email what's happening. Follow us on our social media at Saving Innocence. And if you poke around the website, there's, like I said before, there's 5 or 6 videos on there. Learn about what's happening. And I would say that everybody should be actively supporting anti-trafficking work in some way, shape, or form. You don't have to quit your job and go do it. You can still keep doing you. So if you want to support Saving Innocence, go to the Become a Donor page. Become a $10 a month donor, or 20 or 50 or 100 or whatever you want. Become a little donor to the size that is good for you. That would be awesome. If any of your listeners are in Southern California, we do have volunteer opportunities. We throw birthday parties and baby showers and graduation parties for our kids all the time. We're always looking for people to help us gather presents and items that we need, tangible items. We have, clothing items, those kinds of things. A really great way, especially for people that don't live in LA, which is probably most of your listeners, I'm guessing. We ask people to send us gift cards like Walmart, Target, food places, and we use those directly with the kids that we serve. So go on our website, you'll see a mailing address. Next time you're in the grocery store, throw in 4 or 5 or 6 different gift cards of the tangible kind of places and drop them in the mail to us. That'd be incredible. If we just randomly got 100 gift cards from a bunch of different people, that would be a big difference for us. So that's a way you can support Saving Innocence.
Awesome. And you said that, I know you said the book is on Amazon, but what is your personal website?
Yeah.
So they can, nothing against Amazon, I guess, per se, but go directly to you, right? What is the website again?
It's fightforme.net. Fightforme.net. Social media is Fight For Me Book, at Fight For Me Book. You can follow the conversation on that, the various social medias. But go to fightforme.net. You can get the book there. And like I think I said earlier, the contributors are there, the biographies of the trafficking survivors that have participated in the book. Some of them have books and podcasts and things. And so I'd say just take a giant step forward. And it'd be pretty easy just to begin to learn the education process of this issue. Buy the book, buy a bunch of books, give them to all the men in your life. You can email me off of the fightforme.net website. My email's there. Send me an email if you have a follow-up question. Hey, what about this? What about that? Great podcast, but I have another question. You didn't cover X, Y, and Z. I would love to have that conversation. I had a guy recently reach out. He found the book on Amazon. The title jumped out at him. He read it. His life has changed. I want to get involved. What do I do? And so we connected. He sent me something over Facebook, and we got on the phone together. So I'm very happy to continue the conversation. I'll come back and do another podcast with you guys if you want. But go to fightforme.net, buy a bunch of books, give them to all the men in your life. Proceeds are benefiting survivors of trafficking, and then have the conversation. Meet once a week. Go have coffee with your guys. Hey, this week we're going to talk about chapter 4. And that might make 2 weeks. We're authentic masculinity. We're going to break down these pillars. Okay, let's just talk about it. Grab a glass of whiskey or whatever it is you guys are drinking, or go to Starbucks and get some tea or something. Get with your guys and process the content and the information. And somewhere in the darkness, when you're kept up at night because you're so bothered by it, you'll have the answer of what your part of the solution will be. And some of you may be a major role, some of you not so much, but the key is everybody has to do something. We need all hands on deck.
Excellent. And the last question I'll leave you with, right? Which movie is better, Braveheart or Gladiator?
Well, you obviously haven't read my book yet, but when you do get it and read it, you're going to find out that the number one greatest movie of all time is Braveheart. And I quote the movie Braveheart several times in the book. I love Gladiator, because a gladiator on the poster says, Maximus Decimus Meridius says, what we do in life echoes in eternity. Mm-hmm. And I talk about that in the book, that our actions actually will echo in eternity. We'll make generational changes by stepping into this fight. And then Braveheart, he talks about leadership a lot in this little scene in the movie. Your title gives you a claim to the throne, but men don't follow titles. They follow courage. If you just show some courage, very inspirational things happening in Braveheart.
Yeah.
And then the movie poster says, all men die, but few men really live. And so my challenge for men is to jump in and live this life that we've been meant to live, of strength and courage and leadership, and bring hope and healing to the world. And that's a longer answer, but you get me talk about Gladiator and Braveheart, you get me fired up, And, that's what we got to do.
Just in time for part 2.
Yeah, just in time. Yeah, next time you can hear us discuss break down Braveheart and why it's the greatest movie of all time. Okay, guys. But
absolutely.
But Alan, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us.
Such a pleasure.
This was fantastic. Again, this is one of the biggest issues happening today. And it's something that I think people can fight actively, right, in their own way, like you've mentioned. So, guys, as always, make sure you like and subscribe. Share the show with your friends, especially this show. Please share it everywhere. This is such an important topic. And then, of course, if you can either, like I said, subscribe on YouTube. You hit the notification bell. You can also subscribe Apple and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating, please, if you can. And again, check out Alan's book. Check out Saving Innocence, right? Get involved in whatever way you think you can, right, to take part in fighting this. So we love you guys, and we will see you next week.
Later.